If you want to take advantage of enterprise voice in Lync 2010, you need to be able to either go through an existing IP-based PBX or through a voice gateway. What we're looking at here is a traditional voice over IP implementation. We've got an IP-based PBX. He's got a T1 trunk out to the PSTN, or the public switched telephone network. That T1 trunk gives him 24 channels, so we get 23 simultaneous calls with one signaling channel for call setup. Now we can route our calls through this PBX and get calls out to the PSTN this way. And of course, you could also have just standard POTS lines plugged into some kind of device out here as well. But the main thing to take away from here is if you want to utilize T1 voice trunks, you'll need to have some kind of middleman, either a PBX or a gateway in between it and Lync. This is a common type of topology here where you have a media gateway with a T1 voice circuit out to the PSTN. Your users on the Lync system would make calls going through the mediation role. The mediation role would then stream the audio through the media gateway and everything would get connected out to the PSTN that way. Now this media gateway would be a third-party device. It could have connections to some standard POTS lines instead of a voice T1. But the thing to take away from this is the media gateway would be the next hop for that mediation server to get out to the PSTN. Now, Lync 2010 does have a feature called media bypass, where instead of transcoding media at the mediation role, you can stream audio directly to supported gateways to take that load off the server. Another option that might be easier for you is to use an internet telephony service provider. This is where your mediation server talks directly to a provider on the internet. So you don't need a gateway on site, you don't need a PBX, and you can have a pure Lync 2010 infrastructure and still dial out to the PSTN. The good thing is that when you modify your topology, whether you're using a gateway locally on site or an internet telephony service provider, the process is basically the same. What you want to do is modify your topology and add a PSTN gateway. So what you want to do here is right-click and add a new PSTN gateway. So depending on what device you're using, let's say that I'm using a telephony provider out on the internet, we're going to have an IP address or an FQDN for those guys. In my case, that's 10.1.0.225. And I'm going to have to know, based on the information that they give me, what port that's listening on. In my case, that gateway that I'm using is listening on port 5060, which is a common SIP port running on TCP IP. So he doesn't support TLS encryption, and this is a third-party network device outside of my infrastructure. So this is just simply adding it to the topology. So hit OK here. Now what's going to happen is I won't be able to publish the topology at this point. I need to hook that gateway to a mediation pool. So I just have my one mediation server here. It's co-located on my front end pool. I'm going to go into the properties of that. And I'm going to add that gateway as an associated gateway with the mediation server. I'm also going to leave the defaults here. Now we have a TLS port and a TCP-based port. Depending on who you're using as a provider or the gateway you're configuring, you'll need to plug this information in on the other side. So my internet provider might tell me, hey, we need you to listen on port 5060 as well. I would change that here if that was the case. I'm just going to stick with the defaults and I'm going to say OK to that. And now I need to publish my topology. So I'm just going to right click up at the top and go to publish topology. Now that change is completed, I can jump over to the control panel and start configuring my voice policies and my PSTN usages. Okay, let's head over to the control panel. Under voice routing, and take a look at these routes that we have over here. So by default, I just have one local route, but essentially we use routes to figure out what the user dialed, and then we decide based on that where to send the call. So which gateway to send it to. In this environment, I'm just going to have the one gateway, but I might want to have multiple routes to allow people to either dial long distance, dial locally, and have that go to different gateways. But I would also use PSTN usages to configure that as well. So we have these PSTN usages out here, some built-in ones. But this would be part of the voice policy. So a PSTN usage is something that allows you to call based on whether it's local or maybe just an internal call. Then we hook those usages to a policy that is then assigned to a user. So it can be kind of confusing, but essentially the policy flow is the same as it has been in these other examples, where it could either be global or on a specific user. So you can see here we can create site-based or user-based or just inherit this global policy. But if I had a user policy, maybe a PSTN usage for VIPs, give them the ability to dial long distance where others might not. So that's the concept. Let's start out by creating a new user policy. I'm going to do one for VIPs in Phoenix. We'll call it Phoenix VIPs. VIPs will be able to do just about anything. We'll talk more about these calling features as we go forward, but here's the PSTN usages. So I'm going to create a brand new PSTN usage. I'm going to call this Phoenix local. And then I'm going to create a route for this destination. So this will be a Phoenix local route. And basically, when anybody dials a local number for Phoenix, which would include +1 602, +1 480, and +1 623, which are all local area codes here in Phoenix, that's a local call. We'll associate it to our existing gateway in our topology, which is that 10.1.0.225. So I'm going to say OK there. I'm also going to create a usage for long distance as well. So that's good for this one. Let's say OK there. I'm going to create a new Phoenix long distance usage here. So users in Phoenix to dial long distance. We'll create a new route for this called Phoenix long distance as well. And really here with this one, anytime somebody dials +1, regardless of where that goes, we'll go ahead and permit that. And again, here I could use a separate gateway for this if I needed to. All right, so we have a usage for that. So this particular policy has two usages, the ability to call local and long distance. And that's only going to be applied to VIPs. So this is going to be a user-based policy. Remember, I'll have to assign this specifically to end users. Now I'm also going to create another policy based on the site. So for Phoenix, basically, if you're in the Phoenix site and you're not a VIP specifically, you're only going to have the ability to dial Phoenix local. So based on the settings here, since it's assigned to the site, I wouldn't have to hook it to a user. Anybody homed in a pool in Phoenix would be able to dial local, and it would be up to me to assign a user-based voice policy to somebody that wants to dial long distance. So let me go ahead and commit that. That's saved there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this VIP's voice policy to a particular user. So I'm going to go over to users. I'm going to look for Mike. It's enabled for enterprise voice. And what we're going to do here is scroll all the way down and, well, not all the way. Actually, we're going to scroll on the screen about halfway down to the voice policy. So if we're on automatic, we're going to inherit the site policy because this user is homed in Phoenix. But what I want to do is I want to give him the ability to dial long distance. So I'm going to assign the Phoenix VIP's voice policy to him. Now that's committed and we're good to go. And let me find another user out here. Erica. Take a look at her. And let's leave her voice policy on automatic. So she'll be able to dial local, no long distance. Mike will be able to dial both. So we'll go ahead and cancel this. So let's switch over to the client machine and take a look and see if this works. Okay, so I'm signed in as Mike Pfeiffer. He's got the VIP's voice policy. I need to sign out first since I've changed that. Recently assigned that voice policy. So I'm going to sign back in, download that new voice policy. Then I should be able to dial a long distance number like 913-555-1212. When that normalizes, I can click call, and that should send that call to the gateway. And the fact that it's ringing means it's actually trying that. So the voice policy has kicked in. It's allowing me to do that. So that's a long distance call that works. And of course, 480-555-1212, which is a local call, would also work just fine. So it's ringing. We know that the voice policy is allowing it to attempt to make the call. So let's close out of that. Let's sign out and sign back in as Erica, who is a user that is inheriting that site-based dial plan, or voice policy, I should say. So email, sign in here. And let's try 480-555-1212. So it's a local call. Okay, so that's ringing. Close out of that. And then let's try long distance. So 913-555-1212. So as you can see, the call was not completed because the voice policy does not allow that long distance call to be made by this user.